Hi everybody, this is John, W9EHU, and I got another project that I just finished up here. It's a Drake 2B receiver, and this is my third receiver in all these years. I've been a ham since 1960, but once again, this is my third one now that I've rebuilt here. And I want to show you the things I've done to it. I made some improvements to it, and it really plays nice. So I'll get the camera off the mount here, and I can get some close-ups to what I'm doing. Okay, one of the first things I did naturally was to clean the front panel and everything, and the chassis, and look at that here. What I did was, after I cleaned the chassis, I took some kind of spray, lacquer spray, and of course I sprayed some in the cap of the lacquer cap of the can, and then with a paintbrush. But what I did was I put masking tape. I have to pull all these tubes out, and I masked everything off, masked this area and all that, and then I sprayed the chassis. Now it's got a lot of rust on it, and it probably looks a little darker in the camera, but after spraying everything, you want it to dry overnight. And give it a second coat, but make sure all the sockets have been protected. In this area here is protected, you know, crystal socket and all that. And I sprayed all this around here. Now that's going to seal the chassis, so I don't have to worry about the copper chassis rusting anymore. That's going to be set for life. And then I took the paintbrush, thin paintbrush, and then I just did some touch-ups. Where the spray didn't get, I couldn't get in under stuff, so just went around the whole thing. And now the chassis is all protected. I even took the wheel here for the string, dial string, and went 100, all the way around with the wheel and with the brush too, and put another coat on that. So that took care of that real nice. So that protected that. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about is the antenna input protection right here. That's the antenna right here for the long wire. Of course, I did install a chassis mount jack here for coax cable. And then when I did that, I added the protection underneath this thing, behind here. So I'll show you that when I get the radio flipped over. Alright, we're looking at the antenna connector right here. And what I have is this connector also has a NE2 neon bulb, and with a 10 megohm resistor going to ground on one side, and then the hot side of the resistor and the neon bulb goes to the hot side of the antenna. Now the purpose of that is so that when you got your antenna hooked up to the radio, the receiver, and there's lightning or in the winter time the snow's blowing and all that, you'll have static electricity build up. It'll come down the antenna, come into the coax, and especially having a solid state radio, it's bad for it. But anyway, this voltage comes down, and the 10K or the 10 meg resistor will take its a path to ground for the electrical charge that's on the coax coming in. Also, during when you're trying to use the receiver along with a transmitter, any RF coming down the coax to the receiver from the changeover relay. If it's too strong, the resistor will help and the NE2 will flash. So I don't know exactly what the voltage it has to be to trip that thing, but anyway, I got some protection on the front end. And we used to use that all the time back in the 60s when they had the old Drake 2NT or the whatever transmitter you're using with the 2B here. So it's just a mod to put in there for protection. Don't cost next to nothing, but you have it. That's all in there. Now, the next thing I'll talk about is converting this receiver to 160 meters. There's always provision on the chassis for 160. It's just that you have to have the mod and install it, and I'll show you what that is. Well, anyway, before I get to that antenna protection here, I'll get onto the schematic so you can see it here. And it's right here. Right down here. See, it's the wire that goes to the outside for the long wire. Well, in series with that, I put the SO238 or whatever it is, the chassis mount in series with that, and then I put the NE2 to ground with a 10 megohm resistor. You can put a 1 megohm resistor too on there, but this is a good idea also to put if you have a mobile HF rig, you can from your antenna to ground put a 10 megohm resistor in there to ground. So as you're going down the highway and all that, and you got your radio hooked up, the antenna's going to pick up static electricity and stuff, and this will help it to bleed off. Now we'll get to the 160 mod, and this is the paperwork here, and I'll give you this part right here so you can put it on pause and read it. Then you come down here, the bottom section of it, it's right here. And what it is you add this capacitor right here. You add this capacitor, and you add this capacitor right here, and this variable capacitor, just a pattern capacitor. And then of course you need the 5.5 megahertz crystal to make this thing work, and it does work. Here's the chart here for the crystal, and you'll on 160 you'll use the 0 to 100 logging scale on the front of the radio. So it will start off right here. It starts at 1400 kilohertz AM band, and as you go up on AM radio, then you hit the 1.8, ends up on 2 megs for 160. And a pre-selector a good place to start off is at 8.5 on the pre-selector. But you'll find the 160 that pre-selector go from one end to the other. Just that 200 kcs that you want for 160, that pre-selector has to be tuned for the best, strongest signal, and that goes into socket A. Now my radio, I didn't have the exact parts, so I did have the 390 right up in here, and I just going through my junk box, I was lucky to find it. I had a crystal from the way back when, and for the pattern capacitor, I found that a 5 to 300 worked okay, and a 1200 picofarad orange dip would work, silver mica, and then I used, let me see, yeah, okay, so it's 1, 2, it's 3, there you are. So in place of the 5 to 25, sit down here a little bit. In place of the 25, which was over here, I got a 500 to 300. And then in place of this one, what Drake recommends, a 1330, I have a 1200. 1200. So with these two combinations, and my two combinations, I still was able to make this thing work okay on 160. So that worked. And I'll show you what it looks like inside of the radio. There's a little drawing I made. Drake don't give you this, but in their manual you don't see this. But I drew it out, and this is identifying the coils up there and the pattern capacitors that are on the left side of the radio. Of course, the 160 pattern I put in there right here. I installed that, and that's the one that should be a 5 to a 25 microfarad picofarad capacitor, but mine's a 5 to 300. All right, and then on the back here, I put this down here so that you know how to hook up a Q multiplier to the Drake 2B. So I made that, a little extra in the manual that I installed here. So we'll come back up here now and we'll take a look. And here's the actual install. Here's the 160 meter. Now you have to be careful when you put these in, because these pattern capacitors may short against the chassis. So you have to make sure there's no short. You have to, it depends on what kind of capacitor pattern you end up with. And this one here, I had to make sure it was just right in there, and it worked out fine. But another thing I found out too later on when I was working on this radio, for some reason this pattern capacitor, when it was tapped around here and all that, it would cause noise in the front end. So what I had to do, I put pressure on it, and I took some super glue, the thin type, and I just put a bead here across these, right across this joint right here. And then of course I had to wait a couple minutes until that super glue set in. They got a thing called kicker, a chemical you spray onto the super glue, super thin glue, and it makes it set up immediately. But you don't get too much. Well, what happened after that, I found out that when I went to adjust this, these wouldn't open up. I had to go with a knife very carefully and pluck these up to free them, and then I was able to adjust it again. So if you adjust this thing and then, like I say, you tap it and it's making noise, super glue this, but then you're going to have to go back and very carefully pluck these up. But you got to be careful now that you don't break the mica insulator here that separates the two plates. So there's your coils now identified for alignment. Okay, now we get back over here. I'll see if I can't get enough light to see inside where the mod's at. Alright, come down over here. I don't know if I can get enough light down in there or not. Fluorescent light and LED lights are not the greatest. I don't like them. But anyway, the capacitor, this 160, there's the mica capacitor, or silver mica, whatever you want to use. down on that new pattern capacitor. And then you got a wire that runs from there, and it runs down inside here to the switch. Okay, and the other side is soldered down over here. So anyway, it's very simple. You just gotta be careful what you're doing and find out where it is. And then that 1390, that's this one right here. This 1390 will be down inside here. Let's see, it's right there. And you can see I have two capacitors in parallel to come up with the value that I needed. They're silver mica, so they're stable, and they worked out fine. Nothing fancy. I didn't have to. Well, if I want parts, I got to order it, and usually it's $8 just for shipping. So you buy $1, part, and it costs you $8 to get it. But using being a ham, you know, you put what you have together, and it worked out fine. So that's the 160 mod there. By the way, while you're down in there on that you want to replace or add the antenna protection. Pointer here. The antenna protection. Up at V2, there is it should add a bypass capacitor to ground as a 0.01. Goes from pin 7 of the 6U8 tube across the resistor. Looks like it's 330 ohms, R8 it looks like, to ground. You add a 0.01. It could be low. It's a low voltage point, so you know, whatever you have in a 0.01 small disc capacitor, put that to ground. So that this here mod is actually what's in a Drake 2C. They've added that improvement there. So the next one we're going to go to now is the I want to replace the rectifier tube. I don't like. Let's see if I can get some lighting here. I don't know. It's hard to. I don't like the having a high voltage right along the 6-volt filaments. These old transformers, they don't like that, and you blow the transformer. So the first thing you want to do naturally on this power supply mod is to replace the line, AC line input cord with a 3-wire. Okay. And then make sure you have a half amp fuse in there. Gee, I had this other scope the other day I'm working on. It's supposed to be a half amp, and the guy had a 3 amp in there. Man, I'm glad I didn't have a problem. But anyway, that's the first thing you do on the power supply. Replace the cord with 3-wire, and then make sure that's a half amp there, protection on the radio. Then we come on over and we pull out, you take out the 6X4, I believe it is, tube, you pull that out. And then in place of it, you're going to add a diode on each side, full wave. And across each diode, you want to bypass each diode with a 0.01 capacitor. Alright, and then you're going to have a resistor. You're going to need a resistor, surge resistor. It's going to be 330 ohms is what works. You want this to work out for you. 330 ohms at 10 watt. It's going to be in series with the output of the 2 diodes there. And that's going to go to your main big capacitor, which is C70A, B, and C. That feeds that capacitor with your high voltage. And then of course, you know, probably you have to replace the capacitor after all these years. This one has one of those $40 capacitors. It's a new one, like the original, and that was put in there. Also, coming off of the 6.3 volt winding, filament winding, all right, I have a 0.1 ohm resistor. You want an 8 watt resistor, 8 watt, 0.1 ohm, 1/10 of an ohm. You put that in series, feeding the string of vacuum tubes. With this resistor in there, you no longer have to worry about let me say, without the resistor, your filament voltage is going to be about 7.2 volts. That's going to take down the life of all your tubes and your indicator lights. So you want that 0.1 ohm at 8 watts. It'll drop the voltage down to 6. I was measuring with my digital meters 6.2 volts AC onto the filaments and on the indicator lamps. So that way, with the modern now housing and electrical system, my house is at 122 volts. It's no longer 115, 120, 122. So that 0.1 at 8 watts will take care of your filaments. So now with the solid state and the dropping resistor for the filaments and all that, you're in good shape. Now you'll have to figure out how you want to do this on your mine. I'll show you where I put these diodes and capacitors onto a terminal strip here inside the radio, and I'll show you that here right now. And let's see here. They're right down here. Right along here is your diodes. There's a diode there and diode there, and in parallel across the diodes is the capacitors, bypass capacitors. This helps so you reduce hum in a receive. Okay, that's what that does there. That takes care of that. And of course, this is here is my voltage dropping, my 0.1 ohm. This one here is a 5 watter. It runs a little warm, but it does work. And if that's all you got, then go use it. But if you put an 8 watt in there, a 10 watt gets you kind of big, sticking out here. That's the problem. But the 5 watt worked okay. It runs a little warm, but I'm just telling you 8 watt if you can fit it in there. If you can't, put the 5 in, it'll work. Alright? So that takes care of that. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is, well, since I pulled the 6x4 tube out of its socket, out of the power supply, it was right here. Now I have a tube socket that's nothing in it. So why not utilize that tube socket for something? And what I done, I stuck a OA2 regulator tube. Got these tubes laying around, I might as well use them. And so I installed this voltage regulator into the radio in socket 10, and this is how it's wired. Okay, make sure that pin number 3 and the tube socket and 6, there's no connections at all. You don't utilize them for anything else. Just leave them blank. But you can, all you need is a 0.01 and the tube and some wiring. Now you're going to need to make this tube fire off properly. You should have around 200 volts. With my with my line voltage in the house here and my mod, I was reading up here at the output of the two diodes. I was reading 195 volts. It takes a minimum coming down to the tube. It takes a minimum of I think they said 180 to get this thing fired off. And what the secret is, you want the tube when it's fired and regulating, you want it to run around 20 mils. It should run between 10 and 30. And they don't want you running past 30 because you're pushing the regulator. So 20 is a goal. And I found that using a 2K ohm 2-watt resistor coming right off of the diodes here, going to pin 1, and pin 1 and then pin 1 and pin 5 are internally connected. But this causes the thing to fire off. Alright, but I wanted to filter this filter here on this side up here, because you see that I got a dropping resistor across here, and then my main filtering's on the other side. So I want this voltage here to be high enough to fire that tube. So I added a 100 microfarad 300 volt, okay, and that goes onto that resistor. That goes to pin 1, but the other side goes to ground. You see here, this is ground here on the filament windings. So I put that in there, and that is right over here. Okay, so that's my filter, and help to boost the voltage so I can fire off the V10, which is right over here. Right here. And so that thing puts out now 150 volts regulated. Now with that regulation coming off of that tube, we come over here, and this 150 volts now will come up to this part of the schematic right up here. Oh, yes. This lighting is shadowy or something here. Right there. See, it says to V10 150 volts regulation only, and you see it goes to transformer. Let's see what this transformer is here. If I can see the number here, and I don't see. It's off of V3, but it goes to B2 there. B2 is a voltage. There's 4 different voltages here, 4 different ranges. And and plus the regulator. But anyway, it goes to right here on the schematic. Now what happens is, if I can get a little better like this. Okay. It puts regulation, comes down here, and V3, which is another mixer, second mixer, okay, and there's another oscillator here. I think this oscillator, oh, this is your from your VFO. This is your tuning right here. Right here's your tuning. So you got the oscillator here, and then you got the plate of the mixer signal coming here, plus the oscillator. It mixes and it comes out with another IF. Okay. So this tube becomes regulated B+, and that helps that. And at the same time, up here, you come over with that same regulated 150 volts, comes over, goes through the bandpass tuner here. That's the tuner, that bandpass thing which you're going to be peaking the signals with, and it comes down to the third mixer. And puts B+ onto this plate of V4. So you got two tubes now that have B+ regulation on it. And so it does help, because this receiver is very stable. For a tube radio from 1960, this thing, man, especially after about 30 minutes for sure, this thing just rocks it. I can go in the house, have supper, and come back out, and the guys are still talking on the same frequency, and I don't have to retune for them. So that takes care of that. Let me give you, here are some voltages here. This is what I was telling you about the different voltages. This is the measured, actual measured. And I got B1 as your main. So when you see the symbols on the schematic, this is where the voltages should be. B1 is 175, and B2 is 164. B3 is 142 volts, and B4 is 175 volts, and then plus the 150 regulator. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 volt different voltages running through the radio. And then of course over here I look at it, and I show the 160 mod and the antenna. I list the parts there that I used. So you can, if you got a junk box full of parts, you can play around with it and come up with the right values and make that radio work on 160, and it's nice. I just wish I had I have a LMAC AF68 alpha, but it only runs from 80 through 6 meters, and the AF67 AM transmitter runs from 160 to 10, so I don't have the 160 band, but that's too bad. But anyway, that's what that readings are about. And then down here, of course, I got the all the information on what I added to the tube and the parts I had to use and all that. So you got all that information you need. So now we're going to come to the next part, and by the way, before I get to that, I want to tell you, when you replace this big filter, and you may not want to spend the $40 for that. You may add individual computer grade capacitors. You can do that, but when this is replaced, you want to make sure that you get. Let's see, I'm going to find it right here now. Where's my pen? Right here. Make sure that these tabs are really grounded, soldered to the chassis. You want a good chassis ground, okay? You don't want no hum and all that stuff getting through the audio. But make sure that's a good solid ground. It's kind of hard to do unless you got a halfway decent iron. Now getting over here, the next thing I did was. Well, I did have a on the S meter, when I was trying to adjust the AVC and all that, and try to zero the S meter. The S meter was jumping back and forth like crazy whenever I just touched the adjustment. And that S meter is actually on the front of the receiver. Let me see if I can get the receiver up in a minute. S meter, 0 meter adjustment is right here. Okay, and I think that was R24 if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, the original one was bad, so I had to get an ordinary volume control and grind it off, and then put a slot in it, then paint it. Because normally with the proper actual replacement part, this part here isn't sticking out. It's down inside the receiver front panel. But this worked out fine, and then I had to spend about $20 worth of mailing and all that for one part. So I fixed that. And that was right up here, meter 0, yeah, R24 right here. Okay. Now, this radio came with a 6BN8 tube. 6BN8, and they're hard to find. And mine was weak, so decided, well, you know what, I'm going to get rid of that 6BN8 tube. I'm not going to fool with that. I'm going to replace it. And I replaced it with a 12AU7. 12AU7. Now 12AU7 right here has a filament that you can run 6.3 volts into the center tap of it, and then ground out pins 4 and 5 to ground, and 6 volts will light that filament up and it'll work fine. So here's the mod for that right here. And you want to use, you can use a 12AX7, a 12AT7, or what I use, the 12AU7. All right. Now I experimented with all these tubes, these 3 tubes, and the 12AU7 is the one you want, because let's say the 12AX7 gives you 100% gain. The 12AT7 is around 70%, and the 12AU7 gives you 50%. Okay, so I had the circuit wired, and I experimented with 3 tubes. The other 2 tubes, the 12AX7 and the 12AT7, gave me all kinds of power output, driving the 6AQ6 tube. Too much power, way too much gain. That tube is really putting the power out. So by using the lowest amplification tube, which was on these 3, was a 12AU7, the audio, I got plenty of gain. I'm not way over driving my output tube. So I took the 6BN8 out and replace it with this tube here, and this is the wiring on it. This is exactly what if you wire it this way, you'll get beautiful audio. And you see there's a 0.1 microfarad going into the grid. The other half of the tube, you ground out pins 6, 7, and 8. There's no B plus going to the plate. The cathode is not grounded, and you just ground everything, and then at one point you ground it to ground. So you're only using half that tube, but this one half of tube here gives you a real nice audio. And of course you want to replace your put a new 10 microfarad. These usually go bad, and they cause distortion in your audio. So you want good sounding audio, and I wanted this receiver to sound good on AM. Most of the time I'm I'm a boat anchor guy, so I like the AM. So that's what I did, and this is the circuit here. Now, when you do this works fine. But what you do then, you lose your AVC and your noise blanker, because the 8BN8 has 2 diodes in there also. So when you use this tube here and replace that tube there, the old tube, you have to go solid state on your AVC, which is here. AVC here. So there actually was a cathode here, you know, and it went into the tube. And you look at the old schematic. So this, you just put a 1N914A. You put it in there, cathode to anode, and then you come on over where the other cathode was, and you put another diode in there, another 1N914. This is your noise, automatic noise reduction right here. So you put those 2 diodes in there, and so now you're solid state. You don't have to mess with that 8B and 8. which is a hard tube to find. It's an 8-volt filament tube, and they run it at 6 volts. So there's a story behind that, but I won't go into it. You can look it up on the internet and you'll probably run across it. So that's about it on that. And then this is part 1. And part 2 will be talking about something else about the radio. And I'll have it plugged in and all that, and we'll see it run. So this should give you enough to get started on the mods and make it into a nicer radio. Oh, by the way, I'll let you have a look at this print here to help you out on the mod. Okay, here's the OA2 voltage regulator circuitry after you've... This is what it's going to look like when you're finished, the schematic. Get a little farther back here. Right there. Hope you can see that. But that's the information there on that, drawn out on that mod. Okay, let me get ready for the part 2. Alright, after working on this radio, one last problem I'm having with it is right here. Crazy. And that's what it looks like on the scope. So I tune the pre-selector. Got some kind of shorting out or oscillations of something here. Now when I cleaned the tube sockets, I changed the RF amplifier. The problem is in the front end here, the RF amplifier. I took the case off of the variable capacitor right here, and I cleaned the shafts. See if I can get in here to see this. Cleaned it, lubricated it, got down inside here. And there's some brass pressure things here for the variable. I even burnished that and cleaned all that, and didn't help. But here, watch this. It goes away. Okay, so finally I got down. Like I said, I replaced the tubes and all. I cleaned the tube sockets and all that. I used one of these flossing tools to go into each pin of the tube socket, but that didn't help. I put pressure on there, and that cleans it up. But even with the shield, and I'm making good connection. So it looks like I got to replace that RF amplifier tube socket and try that next. And that's going to be a job. You're going to have to get new resistors and capacitors because they're cut very short. And when you take it out of there, take that socket out, you have to destroy the capacitors and the resistors in there. But hopefully, when I finish that, I will have this thing completed, this project. So, because this receiver does sound really good, and with all the mods that I was showing you and all that in here, I will show you. It depends where I splice this video clip into the whole video. That you'll see that this radio really sounds great. All right, we'll get that tube socket taken out and replaced and go from there. Okay, we're back. I got the tube socket taken out of the 2B here on that RF amplifier. And here's what we got. You can see there's a lot of corrosion and stuff around here. The copper, you know, is disintegrated. And so we're going to clean all that up. And I took the hardware here. I'll get a little more lighting here. And I cleaned up these two grounding straps here that was on the tube socket there. Two of the pins goes to ground. Well, the parts does. And I got some new resistors and capacitors to replace. Got a new tube socket. Nice clean one. And with that chassis being, of course, being rusty and all that, that wasn't good. But I want to show you the bottom part of the radio here. So we come over here, and this is the RF amplifier. Boy, lighting, I don't know. Boy, it's not good at all. Here it is. But see where the bolts went through the nuts, there's like corrosion or whatever. The coppers come from the steel chassis and all that. All that has to be cleaned up around there. And then I can put the new socket in and the ground straps. And anything that goes to any pin of these this socket here, and that's over here. These two items will be will be soldered to the chassis. And so that's probably what my problem was that the ground, as I was pushing down on the socket, I was putting pressure on that, and it was making it was grounded okay, and then the radio would play fine, but would release, and then it may play for half a day or something, and then go bad again. So we'll get that replaced. And I notice I'm going to any socket that has a ground, that has something going to ground, you know, component or strip or something like that, I'm going to solder all those grounds right to chassis, so that all my sockets will be grounded to the chassis. And that way, when you have a shield on there, when you got your shield on the tube, at least the shield is making chassis ground now when it's down on the socket. So this radio is spring of 1962 was built according to the serial number. So been a lot of years, and this copper deteriorated and all that, but the nuts and bolts were all tight on that tube socket, and I had resoldered all connections on that old socket. But still, it was this grounding here, and the two pins that had to have grounds on them, or the components going to ground, had to be the problem. So keep my fingers crossed. I'll get it replaced. We'll try it out and see if I'm right. All right. got the antenna on it. Now let's see, we're on the 80 meter band right now. I don't hear no noise. Oh, here we go. It's warming up. Well, it's not. I don't have a whole lot of audio for some reason. Alright. Speaker wire was shorting out to the ground. But anyway, right, during the pre-selector now, no more oscillations. I made a print drawing how the wiring should be. Let me cut down the CW here. Anyway, made a drawing here, but see this is your metal shield in there. Turn that all off altogether. The metal shield that runs through here, and then in the center of the socket there's a soldering point. A little tube comes up out of the socket, and that fits into a notch of the shield, and you solder that. Well, you see here, pin 3 goes to ground, and that's one of those. And this is where your screw comes through the socket there, the socket shield and all that. And you'll use one of those star washers and then put the nut, and you'll tighten that baby down. And you got another solder lug comes up and it solders to pin 3. Well, what I did was I took that pin 3 also with that solder lug and I soldered it to the metal shield here. And of course you got a 150 ohm resistor that runs between the two shields from pin 2 to pin 3, lays down in here. But the pin 3 is soldered right to the main shield. And the same thing happens to pin 7 of this R-amp amplifier V1. You got a 001 decoupling capacitor that goes across to ground, and that lays under the shield between pin 7 and pin 6. You're decoupling pin 6 to ground with that capacitor. So I took pin 7 and ran a jumper over to ground that. So you got the center tube here of the socket, the ground lug of the socket, and pin 7 and pin 3 are grounded. So all that's grounded now. Also, when I was talking to you about this little terminal strip here, there's three lugs on it. This lug here, the center one, is actually ground. And that ground is for this bypass capacitor here, this 0.01 to ground. And also it's for your S meter light. It's a ground for that. But that lug, also, I grounded that. I soldered that to the chassis. I want to make sure, no matter what, I tighten that thing, the screw as much as I can, but I soldered both the lug on this terminal strip and the chassis, soldered that ground, so I want to make sure that this capacitor was well grounded here. So other than a couple hours of twisting wires and getting things put together, the only thing I had to replace actually was the capacitor, the 001 here, I replaced from the old socket because it was really on there and all that, and all the heat solder and all that. I just had a new one and I put that in there. And this 150 ohm, I replaced that. Had to replace that. And because these are real close contact here, so when you try to get them off, it pretty well boogers up the resistor. And then the 2.2 meg ohm resistor too. And that's where your B plus comes in on that 2.2 meg. So I replaced that too. So I had one capacitor and 2 resistors to replace. Everything else, the wires and all, you could reuse. The 470, that was easily disconnected and pushed back to get all it cleared. And then there was a bunch of wiring around here. I just pulled all that wiring back, okay, so I could get to this lug here that's on here and solder it to the chassis. Had to clean all, scratch it up real good and get a 120, 140 watt welder soldering gun, and that worked fine with real thin solder and some solder paste, and got that soldered good. So that's it. The next thing I'm going to do is I don't have a noise reading box other than what was that there? I got this thing right here. Oh, it's a Radio Shack, yeah. But I'm gonna listen to background noise, and I'm gonna see what the noise level is all. Then I want to solder all these ground connections to the chassis, all the tube sockets and your terminal strips, and solder that to the chassis. Make sure I have a good chassis ground. Everything's on the same plane there. Just like in your audio amplifiers, they have a ground bus, and a lot of your components are, so they only ground at one spot on a chassis, but everything else is grounded to a grounding bus. It's a heavy copper wire or something, and it helps take out hum and stuff like that, noise out of your amplifier, especially your guitar amplifiers and all are a bit like that. So we'll go take a noise reading with this thing, because I don't have a noise meter, noise figure meter, nothing like that. So I want to see if I can make see what it is, and after I get everything grounded, see if that noise, the background noise without an antenna, with antenna shorted or 50 ohm dummy load put on it, and see what it if it went down. If it went down, that's great. The less noise in the background is better. All right, so I'll get to that project just as soon as the weather breaks. We're going to have rain coming up for 3 days, so it needs sunshine. I'll be back later. Well, we're back now. Been a few days, and I'm still on this Drake 2B receiver. Now I've soldered a lot of the ground lugs and stuff like that to the chassis. Couldn't get them all, but you had to get the iron in there. Now, last time I was videoing this, I was talk about the noise level and all that. Well, what you do is you pick out a band. Of course, 40 meters is fine, and you peak it up and set it for, you put it on 7.20 is all you need. And I got a 50 ohm termination on the receiver. And I don't have a sophisticated test gear, which is SYNAD test and all this other stuff, sensitivity and all that you can measure, but I just had this noise meter. But the battery's dead on it now. But what I did was I put it against the speaker here. And you can just leave it, and I set it for -70 here. And then I just adjust my noise here until I get a 0 on the meter here. when I get a 0 on the meter. And then that's like, say, calibrating it. I got it right there, and I got that 0 on there. Got the 0 on there for the 40 meters. And then what I'm doing is I'm just looking at the noise on each band, but just leaving the frequency at 7200 on the dial. But of course, you need to switch bands and the frequency changes, but it's still, you don't have to change the tuning, and you don't touch the volume control. You just leave everything where it was at. Mine come out right about between the A and F here. Was good enough to get a 0 on this meter, and you can move it back and forth until you get that 0, or you just adjust the volume control here until you got a 0 on it. And then I went through the bands, and let me see here, I have a paper here somewhere. I still got it. Yeah, anyway, I took that reading, you know, and then I soldered all that stuff down and all that, made sure all the grounds were good and everything else. And then I took today I took a new reading, and what I got was right over here, see? So actually on 80 meters, okay, you could set 80 for 0, whichever you want, but anyway, I said actually the noise level was 0 on 80. That's what I set it at, on the 80 meters. And then on a 40, I actually had a little more noise. Before, it was a minus 1.75 on the left there, but it came out to be a 0. Then on 20, there's no crystal. But on 15, the noise level went down, see, from a minus 1 to a minus 3, so I gained 2 dB of less noise. And that's on 15. And on 10 meters, I went down another 3 dB less in noise. So actually, I guess, hey, grounding the soldering those lugs onto ground, and probably the RF amplifier, you know, that was screwed up there when I had to replace the tube socket and everything else, and do the grounding and all that. But it helped. So it helped on 15 and 10 meters for sure. And I don't know what it does on 20 because I don't have a crystal. All right, we got that out of the way. Now, another thing I didn't mention, but you probably saw it in the first beginning of this video, was I put a heat shield in here. And it's right here. This is the heat shield between the transformer and my expensive $40 filter capacitor C70. Let me turn this radio off. I don't need it on now. Well, I should have left it on, doggone it, because I want to show you something else. But anyway, there's the heat shield right here. Now all you do is, it's like a credit card. It actually was an advertisement for satellite TV. And it's like material from a credit card. I just cut it and I painted it black on both sides when it dried. Then I took some a heat gun with hot glue, and I put a dab on the card on the bottom and one on the top, and I slipped the card in there, and I just propped it up here for about a minute until it took hold. Now this transformer is hot, this capacitor is cool, and that's what you want. You want to make sure that capacitor stays cool, because you don't want to dry it out and end up getting a short capacitor, or starts leaking on you and all that noise and all that stuff, hum. So hey, that extends the life of that capacitor. So that takes care of that. The next thing on your alignment here, they talk about on page 21, and they talk about, let's see here. Make sure I get the No, I got the wrong one here. Maybe it's this page here. Yeah. Okay. On page 22, the crystal oscillator alignment, right here. I get down here and it says test point. There's meter voltage, voltmeter on the test point. The test point is TP. Okay. And on the schematic, if I got one laying here, let's see. I got one hand here trying to do this stuff, but all right. TP is right down here, right here, and it's the V2 is the tube, and half the tube is an oscillator down here, and then the other half is a mixer. It's your first mixer, and the TP, the test point, is right here. Crystal bank, and there's your test point right there. Now the voltage coming out of there is going to be positive or negative, depending on what band and all that. And this is for your crystal alignment. When you start tuning these oscillator coils, especially like E back here, you talk about the E back here, the E coil, crystal coil, and that's the E. You're going to need this test point here to peak it up. Alright, now I want to give you, all I did was take they tell you it's a VTVM, vacuum tube voltmeter. I have one and I did it. But I also can use a scope. You can use an oscilloscope and put it on DC. You want to look at DC, and then you can line it. Scope is the best. You can get real perfect. Or you can use a digital multimeter. Okay, and you stick it on there, and if everything's lined up correctly and all that, if that's all working, let me check my. When I move this radio here, the thing shorts out or something. It seems like. Anyway, if it's working okay, you'll see different readings here. Now let's see if I can get the light out of here, or something's glaring. Well, it's sunny outside today too, so let me move the meter out somewhere else. Nope. I'm getting a reflection somewhere. What a bummer. Anyway. Oh, I know. Probably the overhead light. All right. There's enough light here you can see. Just dropped my goofy glasses. Okay. Now this is a 40 meter band, 40 meter crystal. There's 20. There's 15. See the minus there. On 20 it's plus 0.775 volts. 40 meters is plus 1.58. 80 is plus 176. It's not real high voltage, less than a volt, and sometimes it's just in the millivolts. Band E, which is shortwave frequency, the voltage becomes a minus. But anyway, I go all the way up to 160. That thing is almost 0.9 volts. So that gives you some idea that what that voltage would be. And I had let's see if I can find that paper. I don't know where it's at now, but I had the stuff written down. Oh, I know here. Get organized here. on the reverse side of this instruction manual, after the receiver was aligned, I went through here and took these crystal oscillator voltages. And this is what I got right here. So you can put this on pause and then you can write it down, and so that after you get yours lined up, you should see maybe you're in the ballpark. If you get the coils and stuff in the wrong spots, the voltages will be way off, or it may not be anything at all. So that takes care of that there, so I can disconnect this now. And a couple more things to go here. It's a beautiful day outside, the warmest day so far this year. Of course, the corona virus is going around, and I'm getting a lot done. But I told you about the when I painted the chassis, sprayed the chassis with clear lacquer. This is what I was using right here. Okay, Rust-Oleum lacquer. That's what I used, and it works very well. And here is the clear lacquer finish. So for about $4, that will do the job for you. Now let me get set up here for the next thing I'm going to tell you about. Okay, we're back again. I want to show you one safety thing that you should be aware of. Because if you're not, you're going to find out. And that is, let me get this speaker here disconnected here a minute. Okay, I have a little more freedom here to move things around. But right in here is your S meter. But you have to be careful, because this S meter has up to 100, and it depends, you know, on mine, 175 volts running to this S meter. So what I did, I took some fingernail polish, and I put fingernail polish. This is the negative side, this is the positive side, and I put it on it because, you know what, when this thing is running, you're tired of unplugging it and moving the radio. You move it by hand, and you'll get your hand on here, and if you got the other arm, hand on ground, you're going to be in big trouble. Luckily, I was just moving around one hand, and I got a sting, you know, from finger to finger or something like that, and I felt it stinging. But that's a no-no. I guess the newer radios, if it was 2020, they would have a case over that. You wouldn't even get near these if there was still 2 radios being made, but that wouldn't be exposed like that. That's a no-no today's deal. So, and of course you see a little bit of crystal here, and I got it from somewhere, and I just took a bad crystal, and with a Dremel tool and a grinder, I grind off the bottom part with the pins, and then I just soldered the other crystal in there, shortwave frequency. So why let a crystal go to waste if you got a place to put it and you can make it work in your radio? So you might as well use it. So the next thing I want to talk about, and I just found this out today, you know, thinking about what I'm going to finish up here, this radio, and get the schematic out. Let's see here, where's that other schematic at? Right here. That's the wrong one. Let's see here. Okay. Remember I told you about this here. I told you about, let me get a little better lighting if I can. I told you about this capacitor here that may be missing out of your radio. Depending on when the production runs, how you know, they add or subtract to save money or make an improvement. But by looking at the schematic here, you see that there is a capacitor here, across here. Well, mine didn't have this here. It was missing. So I put it right across the cathode resistor to ground. Because actually it's doing the same thing. It's ground's here, ground comes up through here. The other side does go to the bottom of this resistor and goes across the resistor. So it's this is the same as this. Only if it's not in there, you've got to put it in there. Then another thing I found today was, guess what? This 001 bypass capacitor, the ground, it's you got your B plus coming up here feeding the you got the screen grid and you got the control grid and all that, and it was missing. So this resistor, all right here, there was no bypass going to ground. So this, any RF coming from the mixer and the oscillator is down here, and it comes on up, goes on through the winding of L2, couples over and goes to the grid of this tube. This is the first mixer, yeah. And then you got that, and then you got the RF coming in over here, comes down off these coils and stuff, and then from here goes in and comes out, couples across and goes in, so it mixes the two. So you come up with an IF to feed the second mixer. Well, there was no bypass capacitor, so this is if there's any RF on this B plus, it's feeding back into the radio on your B plus. So everything that was on voltage B2, and B2 is for my radio with the solid state rectifiers is 164 volts. So all my components, all the circuits in here with 164 volts on it was getting some RF fed back into it. Well, you don't want that because that's extra noise into the receiver. So anyway, I had to put a capacitor to ground. And that capacitor really is, if you look at it, it's right at pin 3. And at pin 3, I did not have that capacitor. So at the top of pin 3, along with this resistor here, actually it's 22K. Right at that point to ground, you need a capacitor. So I'll show you where that's at in the receiver here. I just installed that. The goal is the signal to noise ratio. You want the receiver to be as quiet as possible, so the signal that's coming in is well above the noise, so you hear it, right? So that capacitor, I don't know exactly how much noise it was causing or anything like that. If you have a spectrum analyzer, and you can do all kinds of stuff with a spectrum analyzer, you can see a lot of this stuff, but I don't have that. But I guess if you have a computer and you buy one of these new receivers and all that, you can see pretty good. It plugs into your computer, and they're like a spectrum analyzer. You can see the spectrum on either side. But anyway, getting back here, I'll show you where that's at. So you may already have these two capacitors, the 0.01 and the 001 in there, but depending on your production of your radio. And guess what? I don't know if my radio is newer than the schematic or older. Because if you've ever been in the electronics field, they're always trying to remove parts to lower the price, or keep the price the same, but raise their profits. So they eliminate stuff. But you know that this is a good idea, to bypass this stuff to ground so you don't get feedback in here with noise and stuff. So I'll show you where that's at here. I'll get set up. Okay, now C15, the 0.01, is right here. It's right there. Let's see if I can see my stick here. Where the heck is it here? Okay, it's right here. All right. You got a shield right here for the band switch and all. But that's the 0.01. That's C15. The new 16 Yours may be, you know, close by or something, but this is how I had to put it in. Let's see if I get the lighting a little different here. I stuck it right in here. This is it right here. A little orange one. And it goes from the, that's a 100K, and that goes to pin 3. And right at pin 3 there, I have my .001, and then I brought it over and put it to the ground pin right here. Okay? And that takes care of that. And of course I tried the receiver out and it works good. It's working fine. So that's the new one I found just today. And like I said, I don't know if this radio is newer or older. Normally you would think it would be older. This radio would be older. And they put the extra parts in there to make it better. But having worked for a company that was producing electronic cell phone equipment, the big heavy stuff for the towers and all that, they're constantly changing the product and removing stuff to make it cheaper for them. Alright, we'll go on to the next thing here.
That's 105 is getting up there pretty dangerous.
Okay, this is on 75 meters, 3880
what the top end is for a fever, but you were getting close
AM.
there, I would say.
AM.
I think the last time I had a really bad fever was in, it's been about 15 years ago. I had influenza type A, and I was tested, and that's what I had. And I had a fever of about 103.5 to 104.
Radio's a nice,
so
nice
I can't
shape.
even imagine 105, and you only missed a day of work. That's unbelievable.
Both these cabinets here are real fine.
That's pretty amazing, because a fever will just knock you down. I'm glad that you made it through whatever you had, and your wife was okay too. And like I said, Jim, I'm glad your ex-wife and your son didn't have to worry about it. Oh wait, no, I wrote down plus 30. You guys are plus 30 dB. I wrote down your signal strength. Yeah, you guys are plus 30.
Somebody's tuning it up.
Not immediately.
But you can see that 12AU7 audio modification I did gives you
well, let's see. I've been out here in the morning a little bit.
all the volume you want.
In the mornings, they're getting groups of like 10.
With no distortion in the audio when you turn it all the way up. So that mod works very good.
The morning gets away from you.
All right, there it is.
People out here in the morning, so it's kind of nice. The signals have been fairly good. I'm going to try.
Your own bread is just, so I don't think it's a lack of bread. It's just that there's a lack of flour. You can't find flour baking soda. Even if there's baking, it's just gone. So, I don't think they really thought about ordering a lot of that. So that was a big thing. But that and web cameras, that's the two. You just can't find those things. Don, I'll back around to you. So good on the.
Well, that's it.
368. I wondered. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's so much on hold.
Set up here a little bit.
I was going to go up and, visit and drive through by Kevin and Robert. I just wanted relief.
I had just one more thing to show you. One more little mod you can do. And that's about, you probably do a few more mods on this thing, but I didn't put them in there yet. One mod you could put in there's you can put like a 0.1 ohm resistor, quarter watt, that's all you need, half watt, and you put them in series with your indicator, your light bulbs, number 40, I think it's number 47 or 6.3 volt bulbs, but you put that in series with the bulb, and then the bulb will last forever. Because those things, I bought them for $1 a piece at a Hamfest used. But anyway, the last mod I did to this, and I didn't show you last time, is right here. See, there's a, right at the meter here, you got a 22 microfarad, 200 volt. You put that capacitor there, that's on the S meter, and what that does, it softens when you turn the radio on, the S meter goes crashing, pinning all clear across the face of the S meter, and when this particular radio, the S meter was even sticking, I had to go and tap the glass and the S meter would drop back to 0. So I put that capacitor in there, and it'll still go up and hit, but it won't be hitting so hard. It softens the blow because it takes a microsecond or a couple you know, for that capacitor to charge up, so it's the initial hit when you first turn it on, it softens that. So you can do that. But anyway, you can see the radio now, and what I have there is the 2B Q. The 2B. This is the Q multiplier, the CW, and it also nulls out heterodynes. Then of course the 2B receiver that I just rebuilt. And then I have on this side here, I have another Drake 2B cabinet with a metal grill. I have a 6x9 auto speaker in it. And there's room back there. You have enough room back there to install a Drake AC3 power supply, a AC4 Drake power supply, or the Heath kit, and I forget the number of that one is, but that you know, back in the 70s, that has the high voltage and all that, and you could run your transmitters off that, but those will fit inside this cabinetry. So it makes it a real nice radio here, and I'm going to be mating this with a multi-Elmec AF68 Alpha, AF68A transmitter. And of course, I have that project just about finished, and along with the matching power supply. So I'll get that going this year. Of course, I have to build a control box too for changeover, antenna changeover relays. But this Drake, the Drake 2B here, this combination will work real nice with that mobile AF68. So make a nice combination. So I hope you got something out of this with these modifications and stuff, and troubles I had with it, and maybe, you know, answer a few questions that maybe you had a problem with too. So if you like my video, just click on it and give it a thumbs up or whatever. All right, till next time, it's W9EHU John. I'll say see you down the log. Well, let's see, I took out my multi-Elmec AF68.
And they were really mad. They got up and left, and a whole bunch of people just...
So that's what that project looks like. I'll be making a video on that sometime this year, and I'll get it on the YouTube.
We listened to a few songs, and then we left. It was too bad.
But it'll be the AMCW
could have been a lot better deal. But anyway, Kevin, over to you. KA2ZNI, W9XRT.